Hello everyone, this is Damon with Pixnub. In this video, I'm going to be discussing the Golden Buzzer PSD template. Now this template is pretty simple to use. However, there's some things in it you can adjust that you might not realize, so I do suggest watching this entire video if you're going to be using this template. So when you first open up the template, it's going to look like this. And the layer in the middle called Player, which is highlighted green, this is where you're going to put the person. And that will position them behind some of the confetti and the fog, but in front of the rest of the background. So anything in this overlays group is what's in front of them. Anything in the background group is what's behind them. And you can move the person around if you don't want them behind the confetti, for example. So if you move them up in front of the confetti, you see that brought them in front of the confetti, but also the fog. But then you could also move oops, I accidentally moved the player in the confetti group. That's not what I was trying to do. Okay, so you can move them in front of the confetti, but you can also move them, or move the fog in front of them. So now they're behind the fog in front of the confetti. So that is one option you have. And then another option would be just to move them in front of everything to where they're in front of the lighting effect as well. So anyway, just use this as you want for your own image, and don't be afraid to rearrange the layers as you need. So now I'm just going to discuss the layers one at a time. And the first layer to discuss is the one that's called Light Cast Overlay in front. You see if I turn this on, this just gives the overall lighting color effect to the image. If I turn this all the way up, you can see it's a much stronger effect. I'm actually going to turn this to normal blend mode just so you can see what this layer is. It's just a layer of some blended gradients. It's kind of yellows and orange and reds just kind of blended in to kind of look like colored lights kind of streaming in the image. And so by default, this is soft light blend mode with 25% opacity. And that's usually pretty good, but adjust it as needed. Or you can just turn this off if you don't want to use it at all. That's your decision. So the first thing I'm going to discuss is the front confetti layers. There's actually 6 confetti layers. There's 2 in front and 4 behind. I'm going to turn off the ones in the back just so we're only looking at the front ones while we're discussing these. And so in front there's 2 layers. And the reason I split these out in 2, well, there was for 2 reasons. One was for the motion blur, so I could use 2 different motion blurs for these. But the second is for density. So if you want to use not as many, you can just uncheck one, and now you've got less amount of confetti. At the same time, you could duplicate the layer. So let me just hit Control J here. That's Command J on Mac. So I've duplicated this layer. But then I can move this layer around, and so we've now increased the amount of confetti. Now what you can see here is now you've got these 2 pieces of confetti that are identical. If you look around the image, you'll be able to notice those duplicates, like we've got duplicate pieces here and here. So you can either move these far enough away to where you don't notice those, or if you go Control T on Windows or Command T on Mac, which this is actually good for the moving part too. And let me back out and show you why here. Because when you hit the transform tool, you can see the bounds of the confetti. So you can see if you went past the edges of the canvas. But when using the Control T tool, you can also rotate. So let's say you want to rotate by 90 degrees. And for that matter, you don't even have to use 90 degrees. You can rotate any amount you want. But a perfect 90 degrees is good because that just breaks up any patterns you'll see of identical pieces of confetti. Now I purposely added some so it was in front of the face, so I can just show you quickly if you have some pieces where you don't want them. Now you could mask them out in these individual layer masks, but it's easier because if you've duplicated more than once even, or if you have some in the original image you don't want, if you use this this mask on the group, it will hide those pieces for any of the layers within the group, so any of those 3 confetti layers. So on this layer mask here, if we just grab a black paintbrush, and I've got it set to 300 pixels with a hardness of 100%. It doesn't have to be exactly that, but just something that's about the right size. You can just paint off where you don't want those pieces of confetti. So pretty quick and simple. And that's handy too, because if even with the template as is, you might position the person differently than what the default was. And so you may have some pieces in front of them. So this is where you would erase those. Before I discuss the fog, there's one more thing I want to discuss too before we go to the bottom confetti. So let's finish up discussing this top confetti first, and then we'll move into the bottom confetti, and then into the fog layers. So with this confetti in front, there's a brightness control. There's also a brightness control in the back confetti as well, which will work the same. But this controls the brightness of all of that confetti within this group. And this will control the brightness for both layers, but it won't control the brightness for anything else in the image. Now you notice this layer is not clipped to a certain layer, and I'll just try to demonstrate this real quick. If I was to clip this, you see that I'm only controlling the brightness to this one specific layer, but not the other. I know I'm showing this because a lot of people are used to creating clipping masks to specifically target an adjustment to one layer, but the way that this is done, this brightness will control both of these, but even though it's not clipped, it's not going to adjust the brightness of the background. The reason why is because it's inside a layer group that's in normal blend mode. If this was the standard pass-through blend mode, which is default, then this brightness adjustment would pass through and affect anything below it. So you see that now it's adjusting everything in the template, which we certainly don't want. We want it affecting just these 2 layers. So just a lesson on normal blend mode versus pass-through blend mode, I guess. Basically anything within the folder on a normal blend mode for a group is treated like it's, I guess, sort of like its own PSD document, to where the adjustments will not pass through outside of that group. So nothing below the group will be affected, but you can still use one adjustment to affect multiple layers. All right, now that I kicked that dead horse too much with how the layer groups work, we will move on to the confetti below. Now this works pretty much the same way the confetti in front works. However, it's behind the person, and you notice the pieces of confetti are smaller. Now there's 2 different sizes. There's small, and then there's large. And the same thing that I showed with the other layers is you can duplicate those if you want more, or remove layers if you want less, or hide layers if you want less. And you can also move these around too. So I'm going to hit Control T here, because that way we can see the bounds of the layer. And you can see this is for the large pieces. You've got about this much room to move around here and reposition. But with the small, just be careful, because you don't have much room on the small, because it's not scaled up and it's the exact height of the image. So if I use the Shift key and go left or right, I'm keeping the vertical movement the same. That way I'm not leaving empty space on the canvas, because it'll look kind of silly if you have higher density here and lower density above it. Like for instance, if I accept that, and I'll hide the other layers, and you can see that that whole area in the layer has nothing. So just keep that in mind. You backtrack here. Backtrack too far, so all right, we'll get there. All right, so same thing with the confetti in back too. You can move it, but you can also scale this. So if you want, let's just go up 200%. If you want all the pieces of confetti large, and what the heck, let's move them all to 200%, just to demonstrate here. Because what I tried to do with this is make pieces in the background that are further away from the camera. However, if you want to simulate the look of maybe a higher zoom camera, then you're going to have more compression in that scene. You're not going to get the pieces quite as small. So in that case, you may not want any real small pieces. And then you can make all of them large. So I actually kind of like the way that looks. But one thing to consider though is when you make those larger and back, now you're going to want a higher motion blur as well. So, oh, you know what? Oh no, it didn't. For some reason I thought it scaled with it, but no, it didn't. So, oops, 300 is a little bit too much. So let's, I don't know, let's change it up. Let's go 30 on this, 50 on this one. And with the motion blurs, I like using different amounts of blur for each, just because it just looks more natural, so everything's not so uniform. I don't know, I might have went a little bit crazy on the motion blur there, but nonetheless, it just shows you some options that you do have. So I'm going to go all the way back to the original again. Now, what else is there to discuss here? Oh, you got the light cast overlay for the back. And this is the same exact layer as you have for the front, but I've got an additional one in the back. So we've got more of an effect of this overlay in back than front. Now with the back one, it is soft light at 50%, but this one you may want to change to screen blend mode. If you want it to have that more hazy look, then switch it to screen, maybe not at 100%, but screen will always lighten whatever is behind it. And that's why I don't like using screen in front of a person, because it's always going to lighten them and even make them look washed out. But on a background, that may be the look you're going for. And so either use screen or soft light. Soft light is the default. And soft light's going to give it more contrast than screen would. It's just up to you on what you want to do with that layer. Or again, you could turn it off if you don't want it. And then you've also got control of the light's color. If for some reason you wanted to change the color of the lighting, you could do that. I'm just going to cancel out of this. For the most part, I think the default colors go really well with this image, and I wouldn't recommend trying to match this color to the uniforms. That's always kind of a pet peeve of mine, when everything has to match exactly the color of the template. It has to be one solid color to match their uniforms. In this case, it's a golden buzzer template trying to mimic stage lighting. This is kind of just the color I think you're going to want for that. But you can change that if you want to. Last thing is the fog. Not really a whole lot to discuss here, other than, of course, you can adjust the density of each of these fog layers. You can also change the color of the fog layers too. If you wanted to do that, you can just make this color basically whatever you want to help blend it into the template. I like it just with the white fog because this overlay layer is going to give it a bit of color anyway. You can see like this fog up here is more yellowish, and that's because of the overlay layer. So my recommendation is just to leave the color of the fog alone, but if you do want to come in and tweak it, you do have that option. And of course, again, you can adjust the density. If you really want to adjust the density of the fog too, if I hit Control J or Command J on Mac, you could duplicate one of these fog layers. And now you see that you're really giving it a lot more of a thick fog appearance. So any of these that you want to duplicate, you can certainly do that and just match it to whatever you want. And of course the fog in the front, let's go up to 100% before we duplicate this. It's actually pretty dense there, but again, you could really get crazy with this if that was your desire. So, but honestly, I like it just the way it is with just a subtle amount of fog, and that's why I put the fog with the opacities where I did, just because I think that in this template looks the best, but it's really up to you. Anyways, thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in this template, there is a link in the description of this video to where you can purchase it. Have a good day.